This was more than a fortress. It was an Acropolis. A proud, brave people called this home. A strong people, a friendly one. Some still do. A city with walls, many of them still standing. I climbed the hill above Berat early, before 6, while the air was still cool and the stones were still holding the night. I went up to film a castle. That's not what happened. Somewhere up there past an arch, near a ruin, something happened to me that I'm still not sure how to explain. I'll tell you when we get there. It comes late in this walk, because it came late in mine, and I want you to arrive at it the way I did, after the hill has had time to work on you, because that's what this hill does. It works on you. 24 centuries of people have lived on it. Lived, not visited. And if you walk it slowly enough and quietly enough, they start to keep you company. Come up with me. I want to introduce you to some of them. If you've walked with me before, through Gjirokastër, through Antigonea, along the Vjosa, you know I believe a place is a text. The archaeologists have a word for it. Stratigraphy. Layer upon layer, each age writing over the last without ever fully erasing it. A palimpsest of stone. This hill may be the densest page in Albania. Berat sits on the Osum River in central Albania, beneath the great shoulder of Mount Timur, a mountain the locals have held sacred since before anyone was writing anything down. The castle, the Kala, crowns a rocky spur 200 meters above the water. Below it, the Ottoman houses of Mangalem cascade down the slope, window stacked over window. The city of 1,000 windows. Across the river, Gorica answers with windows of its own. And the first line of the text, the bottom layer, was written by the Illyrians in the 4th century before Christ. The Illyrians fortified this hill and made it a city. The Macedonians who came after called it Antipatrea, for the general Antipater. The Byzantines renamed it Pulcheriopolis, the beautiful city. The Slavs called it Belgrade, the white city, and from that white city, the name Berat finally descends. Count them, 4 civilizations just to name one hill. But here is the sentence in this text that I keep rereading. The one that separates Berat from nearly every ancient site on Earth. The habitation never stopped. Not through the Roman fire, not through the barbarian centuries, not through empire after empire after empire, not through a dictatorship that sealed this country off from the world. People have woken up on this hill, drawn water on this hill, and buried their dead on this hill, continuously, for some 2,400 years. This is one of the oldest continuously inhabited fortresses in the world, and the old chronicles trace its people through 3 names, first Illyrians, then Arber, then Albanians. Same people, same ground, one unbroken story. I want to tell you that story. But history, and I've said this before on this channel, it's what I call the first of the 2 claims of history. History is not a list of dates, it's a claim about people, and so I'm not going to give you a list of dates. I'm going to give you a family. Let me take you back, all the way down to the bottom layer. It is late summer, 200 years before Christ. The light is the same brutal gold it was this morning. That hasn't changed in 2,000 years. But the smell is different. Wood smoke, animal dung, crushed thyme on the paths, and under it all, wet clay. Her name is Teuta. She's 16, named for the Illyrian queen who defied Rome a generation ago. A defiant name, her father's little joke. She is a potter's daughter. Her arms are gray to the elbow with slip, and she's wearing undyed wool, pinned at the shoulder with a bronze fibula her grandmother wore before her. She's at the kiln on the lower terrace, and she's arguing with her father about firing temperature, because she's 16, and she's better at it than he is, and they both know it. Then someone on the wall starts shouting, "Rome has come! The legions of the Republic, moving through Illyria and Antipatrea, is in the way. And what happens next is the first great trauma written into this hill. The Romans take the city and they burn it. Teuta stands on the path with her mother's grinding stone in her arms. Of everything in the house, that's what her mother handed her. And she watches the smoke climb off the terraces, and she memorizes it because she understands at 16 that she is now the keeper of everything that was in that house. The recipes, the songs, the way you pin the wool, the right temperature for the kiln. The Romans can burn the city. They cannot burn what she's carrying. That burning is in the historical record. Around 200 BC, the Romans put this hill to the torch. Teuta, I gave you. The fire is real. And so is what she represents, because here is the anthropological truth under the archaeology. Cities are not their buildings. Cities are the memory of how to live, carried in people. Rome learned that here, the hard way, because within a few generations, the hill was inhabited again, rebuilt again, and it would be burned and rebuilt so many more times that rebuilding became something like the local religion. Hold on to Teuta. Her family isn't finished on this hill. The Romans, having burned it, eventually did what Rome always did. They absorbed it, roaded it, taxed it, and passed it when the empire split to Byzantium, and the emperors kept finding reasons to care about this hill. In the 5th century, Theodosius II strengthened the walls against the barbarian storms breaking over the Balkans. In the 6th century, Justinian, the great builder, the emperor of Hagia Sophia, reinforced them again as part of his empire-wide program of fortification. Procopius, his court historian, recorded the works. Think about what that means. The same emperor whose dome still stands over Istanbul put his engineers to work on the hill above Berat. This was never a backwater. This was a stone in the crown of empires, fought over by Byzantines, Bulgarians, Serbs, Normans, Angevins. In 1281, a Sicilian army besieged this fortress, and a relief force from Constantinople itself came to break the siege. The medieval world's greatest powers sent armies to this valley repeatedly for 1,000 years. And the castle you can walk today, the walls, the gates, the shape of the citadel, took its present form in the 13th century, rebuilt by Michael Komnenos Doukas, the despot of Epirus, cousin of emperors. His monogram is still up there, set in red brick in the wall. A man's initials, 800 years old, still legible. Stratigraphy you can read with your own eyes. Inside those walls, something extraordinary had grown. Not a garrison, a town, streets, houses, markets, and churches. The chronicles disagree on the count. 20, 30, some say 40 across the centuries, a density of sacred building that tells you this hilltop was not just defended but loved. Around 8 to 10 of those churches survive. And in one of them, in the 16th century, worked a man whose name you should know. The light in the church is the first thing you'd notice. Not the gold Mediterranean glare outside, but something submerged, aquatic. The sun forcing its way through small high windows and falling in blades through the incense haze. It smells of beeswax, egg yolk, vinegar, and dust. His name is Costandin. He's maybe 14. Say he's Teuta's descendant. 1,800 years down the same bloodline, still on the same hill, because on this hill, that is not a fantasy, that is just arithmetic. He's an apprentice, and his job today, as every day, is grinding pigment. His fingers are stained a color he will carry under his nails to his grave. Because the master he grinds for is Onufri. Onufri, the greatest icon painter Albania ever produced. A priest, a master of fresco and tempera, and the keeper of a secret. A red like no other red in the Orthodox world. Luminous, alive, somewhere between blood and fire and pomegranate. The French would later simply call it Onufri's red. To this day, nobody has fully reconstructed how he made it. Costandin grinds and the master paints, and on the scaffold above them, a saint's face is coming into being. And here is the thing Onufri did that makes him matter beyond the color. He painted faces that look like people. Individual, particular. A shepherd's squint. A grandmother's mouth. In an art form built on 10 centuries of solemn sameness, he smuggled in humanity. At midday they stop. Bread, sheep's cheese, olives, a little wine cut with water. The master eats in silence, looking up at the morning's work. And Costandin, 14, mouthful of bread, looks up at it too, and feels the thing every apprentice in history has felt in that silence. I am inside something bigger than my life. He was, they both were, I feel it too. Standing atop this promontory, looking not only at their city below, but the ebbs and streams of humanity. We're all a part of it, and here, overlooking a people and lands millennia old, who cares for their present as much as their future, it's hard not to feel it. Do you? Onufri's work survives, much of it in the museum inside the cathedral on this very hill, and when you stand in front of it, that red is still burning, 500 years on. And now, hold the frame wider because here is where the political science comes in, and it's the part of Berat's story I find genuinely moving. By Costandin's lifetime, the Ottomans had ruled this region for over a century. The empire took hold here in 1417. The land was turning Muslim, and yet the fortress town stayed Christian. Its 20 churches stayed open, and the Ottomans built exactly one mosque inside these walls. The Red Mosque for their own garrison. Down in the lower town, mosques and churches rose within sight of each other and simply coexisted. For centuries. That's why UNESCO inscribed Berat as a World Heritage Site in 2008, not just for the architecture, but for what the architecture proves, that this valley sustained the peaceful coexistence of religious communities across centuries, in a peninsula where that has so often failed. Berat is a standing rebuke to everyone who says pluralism is naive. It isn't naive. It's masonry. You can touch it. Which brings me to the question I promised at the start, the one every traveler here ends up asking. Why are Albanians like this? Because if you've been here, you know what I mean. The coffee pressed into your hand, the stranger who walks you to the address instead of pointing, the ferocious, almost alarming generosity of people who, by the numbers, often cannot afford it. I don't believe national character falls from the sky. I'm enough of an anthropologist amateur division to want a mechanism, and Albania has one, and it has a name. Besa. Besa is usually translated as the pledge, or the word of honor, but that undersells it. It comes down from the Kanun, the old customary law of the Albanian highlands, and at its core is this: the guest under your roof is sacred. Your sworn word is not a promise, it is you. To break Besa is not to lie, it is to cease, in some important sense, to exist honorably at all. Now, the sociologist in me has to say this carefully. The Kanun also carried terrible weight. The blood feud came down through the same code. Traditions are packages. You don't get to romanticize the parts you like, but Besa, the hospitality core of it, is real, and it produced one of the least known moral miracles of the 20th century. During the Second World War, occupied Albania, poor, battered Albania, sheltered its Jews, and Jews who fled here from across Europe. Families took strangers into their homes, gave them Albanian names, Albanian clothes, and lied to occupiers at the risk of their own lives because the guest is sacred and their word was given. Albania came out of the Holocaust as the only occupied country in Europe with more Jews at the end of the war than at the beginning. That is Besa. That is the deep code running under the coffee and the walked you there kindness. A people who were invaded by everyone, ruled by everyone, burned by everyone, and who answered 24 centuries of that by making the protection of the stranger the highest law they had. You want to know why Albanians are special? That's why! Hospitality here isn't a custom, it's a survival strategy that became a soul. And if you visit these welcoming people, show them the respect that they deserve. Be kind, be humble. And remember, Besa has codes of conduct for guests as well as the hosts. Welcome them to your life and to your door, and maybe you'll start to show some of Besa too. And if you learn no other Albanian words, learn these two: Përshëndetje, which means hello, and Faleminderit, which means thank you. Do that here in Albania and you'll be amazed at how a little knowledge and friendship goes a long way. The stranger who comes into their land with a bit of respect for their friendship and culture will award your soul tenfold. I wish everyone was as friendly as Albanians are. If we truly want a better world without as much strife, divisiveness, and polarity, we could all learn from the Albanians and those like them. And now I have to walk you through the hardest layers because doing justice to this place means not skipping them. The Ottoman centuries ended. The 20th century arrived like a landslide. Independence in 1912, occupation in the Second World War, and it was in Berat in 1944 that the communist-led council proclaimed itself the Provisional Government of Albania. What followed was Enver Hoxha. 4.5 decades of the most hermetic dictatorship in Europe. Religion outlawed outright. Churches and mosques closed across the country. The faith of Onufri and the faith of the Red Mosque both driven underground. And this castle, this living town, had part of its precincts turned to regime use, sections serving as a political prison into the 1990s. Sit with that. The hill of 20 churches, the hill of Besa, used to cage dissidents. The regime fell in 1991, and the people of the hill did what the people of the hill have done since Teuta stood on the path with her mother's grinding stone. They held on, and they rebuilt. The churches reopened. The 10 leka coin in Albanian pockets today carries this castle's image, the prison hill restored as the emblem of the nation. Philosophy has a question for moments like this. It's the question this whole channel exists to ask, the Socratic one. How should we then live? The people of Berat have been answering it, in stone and in practice, for longer than philosophy has had the words. You endure, you keep the guest sacred, you rebuild, you repaint the saints. That's the examined life, lived by people who never read a page of Plato. And honestly, walking these lanes, I sometimes think they've examined it more rigorously than the philosophers have. Now, the thing I promised you at the start, well past the halfway point of my walk this morning, the sun properly up by then, the cool already burning off. I came to the old cistern, the water reserve of the fortress, and it was nearly empty. A skin of water at the bottom, the light coming down onto dry stone that should not be dry. I stood there longer than I meant to. Then I walked on, under an arch, past a ruin, and I was not in my own time anymore.
Hello? 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 Hello?
I need to be precise about this because I have never fully felt anything like it in 56 years, and I owe you the truth of it rather than a polished version. It was not a thought. It was not imagine if. It was a slip. For a moment, seconds, I honestly can't tell you. I was somewhere else, and I was someone else, with the completeness of a dream and the lucidity of being wide awake. Rough wool against my skin, cinched with a leather belt gone shiny with years. Hands that are not my hands, cracked at the knuckles. Rope burned, a working man's hands. I know things I have no way of knowing. The taste of the bread up here, dense and gray and gritty with millstone, the sound the windlass makes, the exact smell of the cistern when the level is good, green, mineral, alive, and the way it smells now, which is wrong. Dust and old stone. A dry smell where there should be a wet one. I am the waterkeeper of this fortress, and I am walking to a meeting I dread. The administrator receives me in a cool room off the citadel, a man of ledgers and seals, dressed better than me, fed better than me, and afraid of exactly the same thing I am, which is the only equality that matters up here. I give him the figures. So many spans down from last year, so many households drawing, no rain since, and I name a feast day that is too long ago. It will rain, he says. It is not a statement. It is a request. If it doesn't, I say, and if trouble comes up the valley road before it does, this hill holds against any army you can name. It does not hold against a dry sky. Nothing does. And he looks at me, this man of seals and ledgers, and for a moment, neither of us is his rank. We are just two animals on a rock, dependent on clouds. And this is the part I find most remarkable. I realized what was happening, and the realizing is what ended it. The instant a second voice in my head said, "You are having an experience," the experience closed like a door. The arch was just an arch. The camera was in my hand. The morning birds were loud. Anyone who meditates will recognize that structure exactly. The moment you notice you're deeply concentrated is the moment you no longer are. These states run on forgetting yourself. The watcher shows up, and the waterkeeper goes home. I stood there, a little stunned, honestly, and the first thing I did was what I suppose I always do now. I started asking what had just happened to me, because I'm a skeptic by temperament. I don't believe I touched a ghost, and I'm not going to tell you I did. But here's what I learned when I went looking, and it may matter to you more than anything else in this film. This experience has a literature. Researchers who study why people visit historic places found that a substantial number of visitors quietly report exactly this: moments of felt contact with the past, sometimes vivid to the point of sensory detail, at sites where deep time is close to the surface. They gave it a name, Numen seeking, from Numen, the old Roman word for the presiding spirit of a place. And most people who feel it never mention it to anyone because it sounds strange said out loud. I said weird but really cool to myself on that path, and it turns out that's almost word for word how people describe it to researchers. Psychology has a piece of it too. There's a well-studied human capacity called absorption, the ability to sink so completely into imaginative or sensory experience that the boundary between imagining and perceiving goes thin. It varies between people and it can be trained. Contemplatives score high in it. And the state has preconditions, and I realize now I had stacked every one of them without knowing it. Months of daily meditation, weeks of living inside this region's history, reading it, filming it, thinking about almost nothing else. A solitary climb at dawn, silence, physical effort. And then a charged object, a nearly empty cistern whose meaning I understood in my body before I understood it in words. I didn't hallucinate a past. I rendered one out of materials I had actually gathered. Every detail my mind handed me was something I had earned somewhere. The wool, the windlass, the fear of a dry sky. That's not the supernatural. In some ways, it's more astonishing than the supernatural. It's what the human imagination does at full power when you finally give it the conditions to work. So, if you want this, and I think if you've watched this far, some part of you does. Here is what I can honestly tell you about cultivating it. You cannot summon it. Wanting it in the moment is the watcher arriving early, and the watcher keeps the door shut. What you can do is build the conditions and then stop trying. Do the reading, real reading, until the place's past is furniture in your mind. Practice stillness in whatever tradition is yours. You are training the capacity itself. Go alone or in silence. Go at the empty hours. Dawn belongs to this. Walk slowly enough to smell things. And then attend to the place as if it were a person speaking softly, not looking for anything, just looking. The old contemplatives, in my own tradition and every other, knew this posture well. They just aimed it at God instead of at time. And here is why the place is not optional, why you cannot get this from a book, a screen, or from anything I can put in this film. The knowledge can travel. The conditions cannot. The past becomes present tense only where it physically persists, where the stone your hand rests on is the stone their hand rested on, where the path constrains your feet to their exact route, where the cistern is not a diagram, but a cool, dry smell rising to meet you. Philosophers of place argue that memory is not only in minds, it is banked in landscapes, and it pays out only on sight. This is the deepest argument for heritage, deeper than tourism, deeper even than preservation for its own sake. Places like this hill are instruments. They are the only technology humanity has ever built for the direct experience of deep time. Lose the place, and that experience goes extinct with it. Not the facts. The facts survive in books, the contact. That's what I was given for the price of waking up early. And here is what shook me most, standing there, back in my own century. The cistern is empty for reasons that would have made that man's blood run cold. Because his fear has come back. Albania is now among the most climate-vulnerable countries in Europe. The European Environment Agency ranks it as having the highest drought severity per decade on the continent. The projections converge from every model. Hotter summers, drier summers, heat waves more frequent and more intense, the rain retreating from exactly the months the land needs it. And when the heat waves roll across this country, one crossed it just weeks ago. Berat is named among the places hit hottest. I am living inside that data this month. It is hot here. I climbed at dawn because by midday this hill is a kiln, and Teuta's family would appreciate the irony. This is what I mean when I say the disciplines are one discipline. The archaeologist sees a cistern, the historian sees siege logistics, the climate scientist sees a drought severity ranking, but stand where I stood and they collapse into a single human fact. For 2,400 years, everyone on this hill has looked at the sky and asked the same question. The waterkeeper and I are separated by centuries and joined by a worry. That's not a metaphor. That's the actual physical continuity of human vulnerability on one rock in Albania. The past isn't behind us, it's under us, and sometimes the water table connects. One more person. This one you could meet. Waking Dream 4, except this one isn't a dream. Picture a woman in her 70s. Call her Drita. It's a common name here. It means light. She has lived inside these walls her whole life, in a stone house her family has held for generations, because people still live in this fortress. Right now, real families on real lanes in houses dating from the 13th to the 19th centuries. One of the last inhabited castles in Europe. Her morning, bread from the wood oven, if the day is baking day, fig trees in the courtyard, tomatoes that taste the way tomatoes are supposed to taste, coffee, Turkish style, thick, in a small cup, and if you walk past her gate at the wrong moment, you will be drinking one, whether you plan to or not, because Besa never left this hill. In autumn, the whole neighborhood smells of grapes. Families here still make their own raki. And her evening worry, when the courtyard cools, the grandchildren are in Italy. That last part is the present tense of Albanian history, and I owe you the honest numbers. The municipality of Berat counts around 62,000 people in the 2023 census, and the trend line points down. The 2024 national census confirmed it formally. Population decline, an aging population, households changing shape as the young leave. It is the story of post-communist Albania written small, a country substantially sustained by remittances from its own children working in Greece, in Italy, in Germany. How does the hill make its living now? Increasingly, from us. Tourism has detonated across Albania. Nearly 12 million visitors in 2024, an astonishing figure for a country of well under 3 million, and Berat, with its UNESCO crown, is on every itinerary. Guest houses inside the castle walls, restaurants in Mangalem, guides, drivers, craftspeople, the woman selling lace by the gate. Is it enough to live on? Here is the uncomfortable arithmetic. The average gross wage in Albania has climbed to around 90,000 lek a month, call it roughly 800 to 900 euros, and that's the national average, dragged upward by Tirana. Farm work, seasonal work, informal work pay well under it. And tourism is a paradoxical patron. The same boom that fills the guest houses drives up prices and property values on families who have held these houses since before the word tourism existed. The thing that makes the hill precious to the world is, in slow motion, making the hill harder for its own people to keep. Drita's family survived Rome, Byzantium, the Ottomans, and Hoxha. The question of our century is whether it survives prosperity. I don't say that to end on despair. I say it because the first duty of this channel has always been to look at the level in the cistern and actually see it. The people of Berat are not exhibits. They are the current generation of the longest-running act of civic endurance I have ever stood inside. They deserve visitors who understand what they're walking through, and who spend their money, their attention, and their respect accordingly. Let me bring them all up onto the hill at once, because this is the shot the mind can hold, even if no camera can. Teuta at her kiln, arms gray with slip, watching the Roman smoke and carrying the grinding stone. Kostandin in the underwater light, red under his fingernails, looking up at a saint with a human face. The waterkeeper and the administrator, two animals on a rock, watching the sky. A family in the Hoxha years, praying silently in a house where prayer is a crime. Drita in her courtyard with the figs and the coffee and the phone that rings from Italy, and a 56-year-old American with a camera up before 6, trying to hear all of them at once. 2,400 years, one hill, and the same handful of questions asked by every generation on it. Will there be water? Will there be peace? Will the children stay? How should we then live? This is why I make these films. If you're new here, this channel is called Renaissance Spirit because I believe in the old ideal of the Homo Universalis, that the disciplines are windows on one house, and that a full human being is obliged to look through as many of them as they can. History, philosophy, archaeology, anthropology, climate science, political economy, I've chased them separately in other essays. On this hill this morning, they refuse to stay separate. They braid it into one rope, and the rope goes all the way down. And the people who wove it, the Illyrians who became the arbor, who became the Albanians, answered every century of fire the same way. They rebuilt, they repainted, they kept the guests sacred. They are right now pressing coffee into strangers' hands on the same terraces where Teuta watched the smoke. This was more than a fortress. It was an Acropolis. It was a scriptorium of stone, 24 centuries deep. It is proof that a people can be burned by history over and over and choose every single time warmth. Some still live here. Go and be their guest. They're very, very good at that. And look at the cistern while you're up there. Really look. I'm Scott. This has been Renaissance Spirit. The examined life is a walk. Thank you for walking this one with me.